Okay, I think we're live, Poffo. Okay, so do you want to do a little introduction, Poffo, or should I?
Yeah, I'll do the introduction. Place the show. So, oh crap. Oh, that's you. I just got a notification that's you being live. Okay. Welcome to Sacred Places, everyone. The Pantheist Experience. I'm your host, Poffo Ortiz, and joining me today will be my good friend Chandler Klebs. And today, what we are seeking to explore and really establish is what makes a pantheist? What makes a pantheist a pantheist? What makes a biopan a biopan? And even though we've had extensive talks on this, and our first two episodes were all about the distinctions, what makes the difference between an atheist and a pantheist, Chandler is really on the cusp, on the edge of coming to this very deep, profound understanding of what pantheism actually means. And he wants to explore this in an online setting. So what we're going to get into now is essentially how do you spot a pantheist, or what defines a pantheist, and then we can also clarify specifically what biopan represents and how it serves as a more formalized, more comprehensive, ontologically sound form of pantheism. So go ahead, Chandler, and chime in and speak your thoughts, man. We're all ears.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Poffo, let me first explain what led me to this thought, this idea I had. Okay, now when it comes to people of other worldviews or other religions in general, for example, you can identify them, right? They're not that hard to identify. You know, if you see people wearing crosses and with shirts of Bible verses and they're carrying their Bible, what do you assume? You know, you assume it's a Christian of some type. If you see people dressed a certain way, especially women dressed covered almost everywhere with these weird clothes, then you identify that they're associated with Islam. You know, you identify these sorts of things. And with those examples, those are obvious, that they are an outward sign of something. Or sometimes it might be not what they're wearing or something. It might be something they say. They talk a certain way, and you can basically figure out what their worldview is based on how they talk. And in the times past when we've done these shows, I'll say something, and then you'll basically accuse me of being a pantheist. so let's see if your accusation is true. So
Is accusation really the right word? I'm thrilled. I mean, I'm happy. I'm excited that you share these same philosophical notions, and that you maintain this very holistic, biocentric attitude toward life. So yeah, not quite an accusation.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, but what is the right word? If accusation is not the right word, what is the right word that I'm trying to think of?
If you think being a pantheist is a bad thing, then I guess accusation is right. But I say it's a good thing. I say it's fundamentally what our world needs right now, more than ever. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I follow what you're saying. And yeah, in many of our discussions, and in many of your expressions, and how you talk, and the way you just the way that you speak, it's obvious to me that you already have this pantheistic understanding. So if you would like to define it, we can get back to what we were talking about off air. Is essentially, how do you view nature? What is your outlook and your perspective on the natural world and the universe as a whole? If your philosophy, if your mentality is one of the belief, the awareness of the interconnectedness of all things, the interdependency of all things, if you have a deep reverence and a respect for natural processes and living systems, if you have an affinity toward the outdoors and nature, and a deep love and respect for life, specifically manifested as being an animal lover, being involved in any form of animal rights activism, being an environmentalist, just showing care and concern for biological life and the systems that are interacting all around us. That's essentially pantheistic thinking right there. And if you want to get technical, from a theological perspective, you're just saying that you equate God with the universe, or you say that there is no God per se in the traditional sense. There is only nature, and nature represents. It literally fulfills all of the attributes and the qualities of a God, of a creator, of a sustainer, of an eminent, pervasive, all-encompassing life force that is essentially responsible for everything and is the source of everything, and at its heart is a benevolent system that actually seeks homeostasis and balance and greater and greater levels of cohesion and coherence and what's the word, equilibrium. That nature is essentially seeking balance between its polar opposite, between all of its differentiated forms. It is always trying to maintain a level of homeostasis. So there you go.
Yeah, and you said something earlier before we started recording about it's not viewing God as nature, it's viewing nature as God. And I was a little bit lost on that one.
Sure. Yeah, the easiest, a good way to look at it is we're not saying that God is nature, even though we are, but we're saying we're not starting from the premise that we believe in a God, and then we equate that God, or we personify that God as the forces and powers of nature. We're actually coming at it from the other standpoint, from an observational perspective of looking at, studying the sciences and understanding physics and understanding cosmology and understanding biology. And we're saying there is no God per se. There is no traditional, like anthropomorphic, intervening personal God per se. There is only nature, but nature actually maintains all of these qualities. Nature is a self-sustaining system. It's a spontaneous, autonomous, perpetual emergent system that is continually growing and expanding and learning and experiencing all these things. And it is all powerful, and it is perpetual, in effect eternal, and it is the source of all things. Nature, the universe, is our creator. So go down the list. The only attributes, the only qualities of a traditionally attributed to a deity that nature doesn't correspond with would be omnibenevolence and omniscience at this time, because it's not right at this time in this experience of living organisms trapped in time, so to speak. It is not a singular cohesive being. It's not an entity that is 100% self-aware and is in control of everything. It is becoming so, and this is where we get into biopan's future speculation or extrapolation based on evolution. So it is becoming omniscient, but it is omniscient on a certain level in terms of our DNA, in terms of the intelligence that it's embedded in nature, the intelligence in all plants and animals that allows them to proliferate and reproduce so abundantly and adapt and evolve and survive. There is extraordinary intelligence there that is antecedent to our own developed consciousness. So that's kind of a tricky thing there, where you can't exactly say that nature is omniscient, as in all-knowing, but it is becoming so, and it definitely has a level of intelligence that goes far beyond our sort of emergent receptive intelligence as we grow. And then of course omnibenevolence, because in many ways nature is indifferent to the individual, and in many ways nature is absolutely cruel and mindless and thoughtless and insensitive to the suffering of its own manifestations, and yet again it is becoming more and more benevolent, more and more self-conscious, more altruistic, more integrated and connected with all of its parts, and in doing so, its own morality, its own ethical mind is actually being developed in an emergent sense through conscious organisms. So those two things, omnibenevolence and omniscience, the God of pantheism, nature itself, the universe, does not maintain those two things, those two attributes, but I would argue that they will become significant in the future. That's what all life is moving toward. And then if you want to go back, all the other attributes, all the other qualities, we can go on the list. Nature actually represents that and fulfills that criteria.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to define some of our terms here too, because when we say nature, do you think people know what that means? Because, like, are we using nature as synonymous with the universe, or does nature mean something different?
Sure. Let's say when someone thinks of Mother Nature, the personification, Mother Gaia, as the ancient Greek goddess of the earth, the great god of the earth, one of the titans actually, is Gaia. When we think of Mother Nature, that's the forces and powers extant in the natural world. When we say the universe, we're talking in terms of the totality of all things, the existence, the existence itself. So we think of the cosmos and how vast the Milky Way is, and all the millions of trillions of stars and galaxies that are out there. That's nature is more representative of the local manifestation, or the local aspects of the universe. So the earth and living systems and the forces of nature and the elements. And when we say the universe, we're just speaking in terms of the totality of existence, but they are one and the same. Universe can also be thought of as a locale, a physical place, a location. We live in the universe, so to speak. We don't necessarily say that we live in nature. I mean, although we do, we say that we live in this universe, and everything is a product of nature. Everything is a manifestation of nature. So they're just two words that sort of have nuanced meaning, but essentially the same thing.
Yeah, so we'll just think of nature as the local part of the universe that we observe and that we're concerned with.
Well, I mean, the local part of the universe would be the Earth, would be this terrestrial globe, the Earth,
exactly.
and our star system, our solar system, and you can take it all the way down to the micro level or go out to the macro, but yeah.
Yeah, here's what's interesting now. Like, and this is something I was talking with Geis about once, and I'm talking right now about the way people use words. Notice that you have all these products in a grocery store that are labeled all natural. And I'm thinking, and I look at this and I think, okay, what is something that is not natural? Because
Sure.
if we're talking nature in the sense that I understand nature, everything is nature. There's nothing that is not nature.
Well, you're making the distinction between what is man-made, what is created and sort of altered and synthesized and produced. Whether this processes could be organic, could be done in a sustainable way or in a destructive way, but essentially, yeah, everything is nature. When you say everything is natural, you could say everything is natural, but we generally tend to make the distinction and say this has no pesticides, it has no growth hormones. It was raised in a safe, sustainable manner, and so it's safe for ingestion and stuff like that. So we say it's organic, it's all natural.
See, that's what I'm getting at. Because the way that humans use the word natural, as opposed to artificial, whereas artificial means humans have altered it somehow. They have intentionally done something that changes something. So it is not the same thing you would have found before humans existed and before they did that stuff to it.
Right,
So
right.
I think that's an important thing to get out of the way there, is to understand that, you know, everything is nature, but humans in their language still use words like natural and artificial to talk
Sure.
about an intended human process is artificial, whereas something else is natural. But even the artificial is part of nature. It is still natural, but people don't talk that way.
Yeah, everything is everything is of nature, but not everything is natural. So not everything is working in cohesion with the earth and with those living systems, with those natural processes. Everything is not necessarily, functioning at an optimal, at an optimal level in terms of health and well-being and stuff like that. So yeah, and I tend to make this distinction a lot, and I'll say primitive nature, because in vegan debates and stuff, vegan and carnist debates, and they'll make appeals to nature, and they'll always make the naturalistic fallacy or make an appeal to nature and say, lions kill and life feeds on life, so it's part of the cycle of life to kill and eat animals, and I'm an animal too, so they justify it in that sense. And then we always say, no, we make the distinction because that's primitive nature. That's kill or be killed, survival of the fittest, law of the jungle, natural selection is at play in primitive nature. We are products of nature, but we live in civilized society. It sounds ironic even saying this, but we live in civilized societies. All things considered, we live in civilized societies, and we no longer just kill and rape and steal and act violently toward each other and act in primitive ways, or we no longer do it without consequence, put it that way. So we don't necessarily want to do things in a natural way when it comes to natural selection. We want to actually we recognize that we're a highly evolved species that has developed a greater capacity for moral decision making and ethical thinking, and using logic and reason and rationale, rather than as opposed to just relying on instinct, primitive instinct, and just our biological imperatives. So not everything in nature is good, so to speak. It's only human beings that have made these distinctions of what is good and evil, because we have the capacity to rise above our selfish primal, let's say, the reptile brain,
and see, this is where it gets really important, because this gets into the whole vegan thing, Poffo, because basically with those other animals, we are killing and raping and stealing from them and all of those things. Most humans are still doing that to those other animals. And so would we say that those people have not yet overcome primitive nature?
Yes and no. We are still behaving barbarically and primitively, but yet our intelligence level, the advancements in technology have just skyrocketed and gone so far beyond. We have not evolved consistently. We have evolved technologically, we've evolved intellectually, but we've not evolved. We've not consistently evolved ethically and morally. So what you have is a being with superior intelligence and inferior morals and values, and inferior standards of ethics, and susceptible to all kinds of cognitive distortions and false dichotomy and defense mechanisms and cultural biases and all these different things. So being much more complicated, having this greater intellectual capacity, these greater cognitive abilities, also has many problems, because we can design machines to systematically torture and enslave other sentient beings, because we can harvest other life forms in mass the way we do with plants, and we have these abilities, but we don't have the compassion and the empathy and the sensitivity that I would say exists in pantheistic circles of the value and the sanctity of life. So if you want to get back to the discussion about what makes pantheism, what makes a pantheist, I would say that you are whether you call yourself one or not, because of how you view nature and because of how you view life and because of how you see the universe. And I would say that's very different than your typical atheist who just says, well, there is no God. Well, I agree with them. There is no God according to what is traditionally thought of as God, but there is something that is all powerful, almost all knowing, omnipresent, everywhere at once, and is the source of all things, is the greatest inspiration you could ever look to. The complexity of life, the intricacy of life, the proliferation of life, the ability for life and natural systems and nature to continue to regenerate and to grow and to evolve and change and spread out and expand, and there's all these forces at work of energy, dark matter and dark energy, and the fundamental laws of nature. These things like perpetually produce life. And that's why in Biopan, I say that life is the ultimate goal. Life and consciousness is the ultimate goal. And that you won't hear that sentiment in general pantheism, because general pantheism just is an emotional response to the magnificence of the cosmos, of the universe, the magnificence of nature. That's what general pantheism represents. And then again, our response to it would be environmentalism and love and respect for animals and care and concern for the earth. But you maintain and possess all of that. So that is not indicative of your typical atheist. So that's why I say you're already a pantheist. Let's talk about how you view nature, because I don't want to say let's talk about how you view God, because you don't believe in God, and right. I don't believe in God, because we're not talking about Judeo-Christian concept of God. We're not talking about the Muslim concept of God. We're not talking about any of the world's religious notions or personifications that they've come up with, where they've basically projected human qualities and attributes onto living systems, natural forces, and elements and things. The closest to pantheism would be animism, Native American animism, or in Buddhist traditions, Taoism, understanding, the Dharma and the Brahma, essentially, like the force, in Hindu tradition. But when it comes to the Abrahamic faiths, they are worshiping and idolizing a human being, a glorified human being, essentially, a big gigantic king, overlord in the sky, a celestial dictator, as late Christopher Hitchens used to say.
Yeah. See, that's the thing
that's not the pantheistic concept of God at all. The pantheistic concept of God is nowhere near anything that this world's religions have devised. There's non-duality present within as well. That's another thing, is that God didn't make the universe. In pantheism, God is the universe. God is the transforming universe in Biopan that is transforming into that God of myth and legend eventually in the future.
Yeah, and see, this is important to understand, and it's mostly just the semantics I'm hung up over, because that's why I don't why I don't call the universe God, because that word God, just makes people think of like the Judeo-Christian type God. So yeah, we've established we're not talking about that, but then what are we talking about? We're talking about, we're talking about reality. We're talking about the way things work, and that everything that people traditionally in those other religions attribute to the work of God or gods or goddesses or whatever, they look at it as if there's a human being, basically a gigantic human being that's playing with a bunch of toys, you might say. That's kind of the way they portray it.
Honestly, because that's as far as their imagination could stretch, because they didn't have the capacity to imagine. They didn't have the capacity to imagine or think of anything beyond that. And now, knowing what we know about science, knowing what we understand about the vastness of the cosmos, the incredible just the incredible length of time that galaxies and stars and planets, solar systems have existed. I mean, it's incomprehensible. And we have a broader understanding of the cosmos. That's my point. And so, what Carl Sagan, coined the cosmos, that is the God of pantheism. And it's not a God to be worshipped. It's a God to be respected, as you would respect a storm, a hurricane, or a flood, or the healing factor in your own body, the biological systems that are at work all the time in your own body, as you would understand the forces of nature. It's a God to be understood. It's a God to be marveled at, and it's a God that is more personal than the God of the Bible ever could possibly be, because it's that God who's speaking to you right now. Because every human being, every life form, is an aspect of that God, is a personification of that God. It is a manifestation, an eye, an ear, an arm, a leg, a thought, a notion. It's human beings are the conscience, the ethical mind of God on this earth. And so, I guess where people get hung up is that God is far from perfect. That God is far from an idealized, human being. That God is actually, in some sense, in many ways, still a baby, and still learning and growing. And in other sense, it's the most destructive force there is. It's something that should be, respected and feared to some extent. But again, it's something that's as intimate as, the learning the consequences of cause and effect. That's God teaching you, to be responsible, or teaching you, how life works. Essentially, that's what God is doing. But again, you don't have to use the word God. We can throw it out. Use the word omnia, or use the word nature, or say all, or say the universe, or life. You can use any word you choose. I choose to use the word omnia as the Latin phrase, the Latin term for all, for everything. So the omnia is what we're really talking about here. So we can get away from all these old, ancient, archaic concepts right now. Let's just talk about nature, Chandler. How do you feel about nature? And do you realize, do you understand that nature is God? And that God that has been traditionally believed in is a lie, is a mistake, is a myopic form of the true God, which is really nature. So let's just talk about nature.
Yeah, and let's see, where do I even begin? That's the thing, is sometimes I say stuff, but then like when I'm trying to get into it, I don't know how. So let's see. Okay, for example, when I hear the word nature, my first thing that comes to my mind is a bunch of plants. Some trees, some other weird-looking plants. That's what I think of.
That's the first manifest on this earth. We got to always see on this earth, because we have no idea how life has evolved on other planets and other star systems. So we associate it with what's going on this planet, on this terrestrial globe. So on this planet, that was the first manifestation of life, was the geological rock formations, and the cooling crust, and then the first seeds of life as plants came to be. So yeah, when you think of nature, you're thinking of, let's say, the earliest forms of life on this earth, of how life has begun to manifest in our history.
That's the first thing I think of when I think of nature. When I hear that word, that's immediately what comes to mind.
Mm-hmm. And then again, all animals, all life forms, like I believe it came about through panspermia. Through a comet and asteroid striking the planet, carrying microorganisms, carrying bacteria. Bacteria existed on this earth for eons of time, like longer than human beings have ever existed, longer than the dinosaurs ever existed, and the dinosaurs were here for a long time. So bacteria, life took its time and existed as bacteria for millennium, countless millennium. And then eventually the first single celled organism, and as it split and cells divided, and it replicated itself and everything that was successful carried on, and everything that didn't work died out through natural selection. So to this point, to where we are today, all of that is the evolution, the growth process of Omnia becoming conscious again.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing about it that is hard for a lot of people to wrap their head around. The idea that if you have any type of life, no matter how small it may be, given enough time, that will eventually become, its descendants will become more and more complex.
Not just time, but all the right conditions, all the right factors. You have the radiation from the sun. The sun fuels everything. Without the sun, there would be no life. So all the right conditions, all the right factors, everything has to be in place, and it happens. I would just say that the laws of nature make it possible everywhere throughout the galaxy, throughout the cosmos.
Yeah, but it's interesting because, like, people have a hard time getting that, though. They have a hard time, like, people, for example, they have a hard time accepting evolution because they think, oh, there's no way we could have had ancestors that were single cells. But why is that so hard to believe? Like, to me, it makes sense. Like,
I have a squash plant on my balcony right now. A squash. It's either squash or zucchini. It was given to me at a Will Tuttle lecture. It was this big when it was given to me. It was in a little tiny cup, like a little Dixie cup size, this big. Okay. Right now, I've transplanted it. It's this big. It's bigger than my head. It's got leaves this big, and it's growing out. And by October, I should have a vegetable there. What makes that happen? The thing that allows that to happen, because that has nothing to do with me. I'm not doing it.
Right.
Like there's no machines causing that growth process, that incredible proliferation to take place. Whatever it is that's causing that is God. That's nature. That's Omnia.
Yeah.
And it's seeing all things.
Yeah, see, this is important because basically, let's think of it this way. Like, basically, when people look at a man-made building, they look at that, and especially if we're talking in ancient times, even before a modern construction equipment, all that. Let's talk about ancient times, people using, big stones as bricks and making houses out of whatever material they have. They picture that there has to be a builder, so they think that one or more humans built that house.
Right.
What I, Poffo, we're saying here is that when you see those plants and all the animals, nature built that. In the same manner that humans build airplanes and cars and houses, nature builds the humans themselves.
Right, and it's not from an external source. It's not. I mean, it's from external and internal, but essentially, it's coming from within. It comes from within the seed. It comes from the DNA. It comes from the chromosomes. It comes from the actual molecular structure of things. The very fabric of existence contains within it the programming to produce an abundance of life, to produce just such biodiversity that it boggles the mind, that it's enough to bring you to your knees when you actually study science and biology. And that is what we're talking about. That is what is truly miraculous. And a big point to note here is that pantheism is very strong on making these distinctions and saying it's not about a supernatural world. It's about this world being super and supernal enough in its own right. It's not about a kingdom come and an afterlife. It's about the superseding priority and preeminence of this life, and that all of our focus and attention and the emphasis should be on the experience of this life, not on a fantasy delusional realm somewhere, because it's written about in a book, in a storybook, in a fable, essentially, in a collection of mythologies and some sordid history. So it's really important in pantheistic circles that we're always trying to make the point that the true miracles are the patterns of growth of plant and animal life. The true miracles are the cyclical nature of the seasons, of the life cycles, of all of the interconnected, interlocking, interdependent, symbiotic relationships that exist on this earth.
And see,
so
this is here's what I'm getting at, Poffo. People who believe in a God of the other religions, they think of it as some human-like entity that has to constantly intervene and has to make things work. And what we're saying is nature internally works. It is self-repairing, self-building. You know, it's like an auto-flush toilet. Like, okay.
That's the best example you could have came up with.
Okay, now let me go with this example, and maybe you'll understand. Okay. Okay, for example, Christians think that there has to be a God there to constantly push the handle and do a miracle to make the toilet flush. But what we're saying is nature is a self-flushing toilet. It can flush without there being an external human to hit the handle.
Let's get away from the toilet analogy for just a second, and let's talk about. I'll give you another metaphor, just so we can clean the palate here. A computer, right? A computer system, a PC, you know, an Intel Pentium processor, okay, and a brain. We didn't have to build the brain; it actually develops on its own. The heart is the first thing to form in a fetus, and then eventually the brain. But the work that a brain does is just absolutely phenomenal. It's the most complex. It's the most complex computer system that exists, and we can't even replicate it. We can't even come close to the neural networking and the communication that goes on within the human brain, or any brain, any mammal's brain, or even a reptile brain, as small and rudimentary as it might be. It's extremely complex. Okay, no one built that. Nature itself built that through trial and error, okay, over millions of years, and that is a pervasive essence that is extent within all things, within all living systems, and even within the elements or things that you would say are non-biological. You know, inanimate objects. Inanimate objects serve as the backdrop. They serve as the landscape and the environments for biological life to exist and sustain itself, like the geological elements and rocks and crystals. I mean, crystals actually behave. They grow and they expand, and they actually behave much like a certain life form. So on a certain level, I mean, this is more advanced pantheism, obviously. On a certain level, everything is biological. I'm saying in biopan that the universe itself is a biological entity. It's a biological system. So when you say it's an entity, is it self-conscious? Yes, through us. Is it self-aware? Yes, through biological organisms. As a whole, in the totality of it all, is it a coherent conscious entity? No, it's not coherent. It's kind of like a scattered, differentiated explosion of trillions of living systems, all autonomous, all like cells of the body, kind of working together, coming back together, reforming, emergent and transformative, and continuously improving and repairing itself, and moving in directions that some that work, some that don't work, and that's how natural selection works. So I mean, you understand all this. Yeah. I would like to encourage you to stop talking about what other people believe and just focus on what you believe. If you understand all of this, you're a pantheist. It all comes down to how you view nature, what your take is on God, and like your response to the extraordinary, miraculous, systems that we're describing. So, you know, how do you feel about nature? How do you feel about animals? When you look at animals, I know you see yourself in them, and you see us all as just one gigantic living being, like one gigantic organism. It's the Gaia hypothesis, you know. That's pantheism. When we talk about a sustainable future, when we talk about permaculture, and we talk about going green, and reducing the our environmental footprint and living in a more holistic, natural, organic, symbiotic relationship with the earth and with all plants and animals. That's pantheism. That's biopan. That's what biopantheism represents. It's the symbol behind me, the interconnectedness, and it's fundamentally green. It's fundamentally a growth process, a process of education and exploration and innovation and knowledge and creativity. Omnia is fundamentally creative. Okay, nature is fundamentally in the process of learning things and expanding and growing and becoming something more and transforming itself. That's what nature does.
Yeah.
That's
So
the God that we're talking about.
yeah,
In pantheism, in biopan.
and it's important to understand that because it is a changing system. I mean, that's the only place I can derive any hope from at all for the things that I don't like. As you know, there's many things I don't like, you know. So the only thing I can hope is that eventually the more negative or the more primitive elements of nature will eventually be diminished. That's my thought.
Right. The primitive, but remember, those primitive elements were there for a reason, and they are helpful. They actually protected it for a long time. That's why my cat, he thinks that I'm gonna step on him or kill him, and he runs away. He gets scared really easy. He's really flighty because his instincts are telling him, to avoid danger. They're reacting for him. They're thinking faster than his own thought. When he stops and slows down, he recognizes that it's me, and he knows that I'm not a threat. I'm not a danger. He'll come over and he'll roll around and I can pet him and stuff. So he's got two different brains. He's got the brain that's in his body, in his own cells, the genetic memory that's there, that is operating with his best interest in mind. This is a very important point, actually. When we talk about the benevolence that's inherent in nature, it's for his best interest. It's for his own survival. And then he's got his sort of cognitive thinking brain that recognizes pattern recognition, that recognizes the association, the imprint that I have on him, that we're friends, that I'm not, I'm his provider, so to speak. So like, it's good to maintain your instincts and trust your gut reactions, but at the same time, as in with post-traumatic stress disorder, you may be reacting and overreacting to potential threats that aren't even there, that are just illusions, and your body is responding to it. So in that sense, yes, we need to learn to evolve and use more of our prefrontal lobe, the neocortex, and the higher, the more advanced, the newer parts of our brain, essentially, that deal with ethics and morality and sympathy and compassion and an acceptance of other, of the other differentiated forms. So someone might be scared of a snake, automatically scared of a snake, right? But then a smarter person will say, oh no, that snake's not poisonous. He's no harm to you. So what's going on there? You have two different brains, the old reptile brain and the frontal lobe. So we have to see the value in both. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, see, because the way I'm looking at it is I'm looking at it that more advanced thing you're describing, that the part of us that cares about ethics, the part of us that has this knowledge that overrides, you might say, some of those other instincts we have.
Right.
That is the part of us that I find desirable. That's the only, That's
but if you didn't listen to the other parts, you'd shit yourself, or you wouldn't eat when you were hungry, or you would never get rest, or you wouldn't move your hand away from a hot fire, or from something, you wouldn't react fast enough to physical danger and harm. So you have to listen to the primitive parts and maintain those and recognize their value, while growing and advancing ethically and morally, as a highly evolved primate.
Yeah, and so, and I know you're just going to say it's all about finding that balance, because I know you too well by this time. But see, very specifically, what I'm talking about is when people for example, when people go vegan, what they're doing is they're putting their ethical ideal over their taste buds or over the easy habit they instinctually just do by habit. And that's
Right.
what I'm talking about, that ability to change and to in a certain sense reject nature in that way, like we're rejecting this old part of ourselves.
Well, it's also, yeah, I agree, but it's also accepting nature, because you're also accepting what your higher cognitive abilities have now taught you through education, through awareness. You are listening to to your own perceptions, the new information that's being fed in, because what you're talking about is cultural conditioning, and I gotta make this clear. You don't instinctively eat animals, because we're not carnivores. We're not carnivores. We're not necrovores. We don't salivate at the sight of roadkill and dead animal flesh, and we don't drink blood. We don't eat we don't eat the muscle tissue and fat raw. We process it and we do all these things, and then we consume it once we've seasoned it with a lot of plants and herbs. So it's not instinctual to eat animals. You're really talking about cultural conditioning and environmental structural violence created by environmental factors, and that has nothing to do with our instincts whatsoever at all. We can crave protein, and you can eat a can of chickpeas or some beans or fry up some tofu and get your protein, but it doesn't lead us to kill and slaughter animals. That's only the culture, the inculcation, the cultural indoctrination that we're having to fight against in this particular society.
Yeah, I guess that's more what I'm addressing, really, is because that stuff. Well, I know people try to say that that's instinctual. People try to say that that's our natural way, and it's not.
They love to associate themselves with bears and wolves and lions, even though we're not even in the same genome. We're not in the same class or category or phylum. It's ridiculous. Like we are 100% herbivores, frugivores to be specific, evolved, descended from the early primates, the tree dwelling monkeys, and we became omnivores for survival during the Ice Age and when vegetation was scarce, and there's just no need now. We should follow our own physiology.
Yeah, see, that's the thing about it, is I'm pretty sure, like, that's the way I look at it, is that with humans and with other animals, that's what happened, is that there was a time when they only survived because they ate other animals. But then that became like a habit or a tradition that stayed with them when it was no longer needed. And that's the thing, is that people, like, they do these appeals to nature, but what they are is they're appeals to tradition. You get what I'm saying?
Right. They are appeals to history, appeals to tradition, which for the listeners, if they're not familiar, I mean, these are logical fallacies. An appeal to nature, an appeal to tradition, an appeal to history is a logical fallacy. It's maintaining or arguing that something is good because it was done in the past, or something is good and ethical because it's done in nature, and that is just a contradictory in terms. That's an oxymoron. Not everything that occurs in nature is good. You don't have good and evil in nature, in primitive nature. So you don't have good and evil in primitive nature, because the animals, other non-human animals, have not evolved, except for the cetaceans and some primates, have not evolved to that level, to that extent yet. It's only in human societies, it's only in human culture that we have the ability to do evil. So a hyena, a mountain lion, whatever, a coyote, a wolf will attack and rip apart small animal, but they're doing it for survival. They're doing it for the sake of food. They're doing it to feed their young, to feed their own system. A human being does it regardless, despite the fact that there are other options. And knowing that there are other options, that's what makes it evil, because it's unnecessary. It's for primitive animals. They have no choice. They're literally doing what they have to do to survive, and that's not evil. But once they develop morality and a system of ethics, and they say wolves, it's kind of a cool thought. Wolves evolve and they become the dominant species on the planet. Somehow human beings die off, like Planet of the Apes scenario, human beings die off from some virus, and wolves become the dominant. So we have all these cool looking werewolves walking around. Now they harvest sheep and they do all this stuff, but then their biological systems also adapt and change, and they start eating vegetation. And once they get to a point now where these upright, hairy, upright walking, bipedal wolves are now growing vegetation, and they recognize we don't need to kill and eat sheep anymore, that's when it would become evil, because they know better now. The reason that carnists and omnis, we would say their lifestyle is unethical, is because there are other options, because they know better, because human beings in general should know better by now, and that's the point.
Yeah, because we
recognize what we're doing to the animals and how horrific, and brutal and cruel, and the destruction of the environment, it all becomes, it's a whole package that there's no other ethical path to take other than to be vegan. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, that's what I'm talking about, yeah, see, we're able to see what's wrong with it. And I like your example about the wolves, by the way. That is a great example, because yeah, like what if there was a society of wolves, but then some of those wolves ended up going vegan because then they became concerned about the suffering, and they knew they had other options.
Once they recognize, once any species recognizes that it's inflicting unnecessary harm onto another organism, then they have a moral obligation to abstain from that behavior.
Yeah.
But let's get back to pantheism and specifically biopan. I don't, like I've always said, I don't care what you call yourself, but it's all about your worldview, your perspective, and your outlook. I've always said pantheism is an awareness. It's an awareness of the extraordinary, miraculous qualities of nature, and an acknowledgement, sort of an internal and emotional and psychological acknowledgement that nature is our source, that we owe everything to, first and foremost, I would say, to the earth, and then to the sun, and then you expand out into the universe, that whatever the source of all this, that initiated everything at the Big Bang, that's our creator. The universe is our creator. That all the concepts of a supernatural world and of spirits and an afterlife, it's yet to be truly substantiated whether consciousness persists after the death of the brain, the death of the body. But in terms of an overarching, ruler or judge, that's non-existent. That's fantasy. But we do have a judge, and it's cause and effect. It's natural law. Natural law will kick you in the ass if you eat a bunch of junk food. The next day you're gonna feel like shit. If you drink and party all night and do a bunch of drugs, you're doing damage to your body. You're gonna suffer the consequences of your actions. So we do have a judge. We do have a sort of a moral obligation to this higher power, because the higher power is at work in us, and it's at work in all things.
Yeah, well, let's put it this way. There's no supernatural, because nature is super enough. Does that sound right? Yeah. It's like people are trying to take what already is, and then they're trying to imagine something else that is somehow higher than that.
Let's be clear. Like, life is hard. I mean, life has been extremely brutal and hard. So these concepts came about in very primitive times, where people needed hope. They needed inspiration. They needed something beyond, they needed to create an imaginary world to basically cope with the hardships of reality. That's no longer needed now that we know how miraculous the world is, and we have even virtual reality games. We can create incredible environments and play video games and make movies and do, escape into fantasy worlds. We don't need to literally believe in a fantasy world. We can write our own stories. We can create our own novels and books.
Yeah, and so that's the thing about it. Yeah, I understand that people make stories, because that inspires them, and helps get them through tough times. And of course, I'm totally fine with that, as long as people don't take it as seriously as have the Abrahamic religions taken.
Right. Because we know we both know that within those religious systems there are a plethora of of archaic, outdated, antiquated, what's the word, philosophies and belief systems and admonitions to do terrible things to people and animals. So yeah, along with those mythologies come a lot of bad advice and delusionary thinking. So let's avoid all that, and let's embrace the natural world, and let's embrace reality for what it is, and explore it, and learn about it, and learn about ourselves, and become, in a psychological, philosophical sense, become one with what already is, with what already exists. The non-duality that exists there. We should embrace it. That there is that there is this overarching force and power that is operating at all times. And this is a struggle for me. Can we fundamentally trust it? Can we trust the universe? Is there a benevolent? I mentioned earlier, I said this is a strong point that I'd like to get back to. Is the universe benevolent? Well, sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. If you go out in space without a suit, you're going to freeze and you're going to implode from the pressure. Same if you go deep sea diving, right? Without oxygen and stuff. So we have to be wise. We have to be smart with the tools that nature has given us, and then we can explore other aspects of nature. But if we're foolish and we ignore, the obvious, nature is going to kick our ass, and it's going to kill us. And it's not that everything is out to kill us. It's that there are aspects of nature that are out to kill us, and using the faculties that we have, that we've evolved, we can rise above that. And then we can also recognize and acknowledge that there's huge portions of nature that are also out to support us, and in a nurturing sense, like the personification of Gaia, the mother, the goddess, is always protecting us and nurturing us, through our immune systems and through our own intelligence, reacting to avoid harm, or using forethought and systematically planning things to avoid disastrous consequences. We are relying upon Mother Nature, or Omnia's intelligence and support. So it's fundamentally providing everything we need through the fruit trees, the vegetation, the oxygen. It is giving us a home. It's giving us all the resources we need. It is fundamentally loving us. And then there are other aspects that are really cold and harsh and cruel, but if we can recognize those things as not necessarily destructive, but more like creative powers that are refining us and strengthening us and making us more robust, as Peter would say, that nature also helps us to grow. The hardships, the turmoil, the challenges make us stronger, make us more intelligent. They said necessity is the mother of invention. So think of it in that sense. It's both,
But in a sense, one thing that I think, Poffo, you may agree with this, you may not, but one thing that I think somebody has to accept when they become an atheist, or even if they become a sort of a pantheist later on, they have to give up on the idea of life being fair, and they have to give up on the idea that things are guaranteed to work out, because there is no guarantee. And that's what's sad about it, is that there are so many elements to nature that are, even though you mentioned a lot of good things, there are so many things that are undesirable. You've got
there's no equality. There's no equality in nature. Right. There's time and chance, and there is the inherent skills and abilities that organisms have evolved, have inherited, and so we're all a victim. We're sort of all a victim to that. And there's really no justice except the justice that we create as higher organisms, higher intellectually speaking, higher organisms that we create ourselves. There's no cosmic justice. There's no universal, laws like that. We have to. It's up to us to bring truth and order in human societies.
Exactly. So that's right. So if there's going to be a justice, if there's going to be a way to balance things and make life pleasant for everybody, it's something that we have to build, basically. It's not something that is just automatically going to be that way, because we have to refine things. We have to refine nature. We have to protect ourselves from the harsh weather. We have to defend ourselves from the things that are going to kill us if we don't defend ourselves. So it's kind of a
bacteria, pestilence, earthquakes, floods, storms. These are not necessarily negative, but they are destructive. They are harmful to beings that are as fragile as we are, sort of biologically. As tenacious as life is, we're not designed perfectly, and that's why we build structures and we wear clothes and we have things to protect us. But so nature through us is working to threaten and protect itself.
Yeah.
Okay? And it grows and it develops. It innovates. We innovate to protect ourselves from other aspects of ourselves, right? It's like a bodybuilder working out, putting tremendous stress and pressure and breaking down the muscle tissue, breaking down the cells, and then rebuilding again and again and again, and it makes them stronger and bigger and more, just more well adapted, essentially, to any challenge.
Yeah.
So this is a growth process. We can't forget that the goal is not a utopian ideal of all pleasure and bliss, as George would
yeah.
The goal is continuous evolution, continuous expansion and growth, and education and the accumulation of knowledge. That's a more beautiful. Obviously it's more dynamic than the idea of just being blissed out and perfect peace and perfect pleasure, forever. Because as I've always said, having pleasure for a million years would then become hell, and you'd want something different. So it's all about novelty and change and transition. Those things, variety, I guess they would say, is the spice of life, right?
Yeah, I can't help but think at this moment, because and back to like the Abrahamic religions, the way they teach this stuff, like this whole heaven and hell thing. Even those who believe like this eternity of bliss, they're in for a big disappointment. Even if it was true, they would be in for disappointment because, like you're saying, they would eventually get bored of that, and they would seek something.
They won't be around to experience it because basically the death of the body, the death of the brain, they're
right.
Unless they upload their consciousness into a computer system or into another synthetic body.
Yeah, but I'm just talking theoretically. Even if it were true that you could, that there was some part of those that lived on after the destruction of the brain, and like even if it were true, it would not be what the people were believing in all that time. Their afterlife would not be what they were.
How selfish and egocentric is it that God will reward you with eternal bliss and pleasure, and you'll be able to rule and judge the nations, to get to judge other people. Remember, that's part of the heavenly reward. We can judge. We'll judge all the sinners. And sit, and thrones, and it's just so antiquated. It's so Bronze Age.
It doesn't even sound appealing, not at all.
I mean, the description in the Book of Revelation of the city coming down, the city of pearl, the pearl gates, and all that, and that was the most fanciful, most beautiful, because that was what was desirable. Riches and gold and crystal and sapphire and rubies and diamonds and pearls were considered valuable. So that city was made from their concept of the most valuable things, and it was an eternal city. And I mean, it's a beautiful metaphor. So much of the language is symbolism, and I appreciate all of the symbolism there. But
the Crystal Empire is better.
What?
The Crystal Empire is better.
If you and I were to describe heaven now, wouldn't it be something more akin to like a beautiful, thriving biosphere full of plants and animals and just rich green and an abundance of fresh fruit and water and animals and a coexistence with all life forms, like a gigantic menagerie, like a gigantic zoo, where there's no death and there's no suffering and there's no competition and all beings are living peacefully. And for me, I would say exploration of the cosmos and just expanding out and developing mental powers and
Yeah.
You know, being able to transform myself into different beings, or being able to go into the past and see things and learn, or being able to go into the future and educate myself, or you know, like Rick and Morty, all their travels. It's a cartoon. You probably never heard of
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah. See,
like
yeah.
those are my concepts of paradise and heaven. Is eternal exploration and creativity, and being able to create new things, being able to create worlds and design and build structures that are, you know, that are beautiful and efficient, and like as an artist, you know. So it just depends on the perception of paradise and heaven. Depends on, you know, sort of the viewer. Like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Like depends on the person who's writing the description. So that's not heaven. That was heaven for them. Heaven for us would be something entirely different, and it just depends on your, I don't know, your level of enlightenment, or your culture,
Yeah.
where your perspective, where your emphasis, your focus is on. And to me, mine's on symbiosis and creativity and education and
Yeah.
knowledge, acquiring knowledge.
Yeah.
So
See, my idea of a paradise would be something like this, where all that exists are a bunch of herbivore animals that never kill each other, they never eat each other. And here's the thing, they also never die, but they also don't reproduce either. And in that way, they guarantee that the population never goes above the food supply, meaning that it's a sustainable and can go on forever.
right, but and like I said, so yeah, that's your version of heaven. I mean,
Yeah.
a planet would be just having one planet just to explore forever would be amazing. I'd be happy with that. But yeah, like remember, if the planet you live on is in the society that you live in, and the world that you live in is in chaos, and there's war and violence everywhere, then you're going to seek an escape, and you're going to seek a different conception of an ideal, you know. So it all depends on the person.
Yeah.
But we're I don't know, man. Are we straying from the from the subject, or are we? Is this all relevant?
Well, mate, let's try to think of how it's all relevant here. Because we were trying to talk about like the pantheist attitude towards nature, and I've been trying to figure that out exactly. What is it about me that makes you think I'm a pantheist like that? See, I'm still trying to get it, because to me, there doesn't seem like there's anything unusual about me.
There's a
Like,
lot of things unusual about you, but first of all, but well, to your point, you love animals.
yeah,
You respect the earth. You recognize the interconnectedness of all things. You view nature as, if not divine, you view nature as something sacred and something special to be preserved. Correct?
yeah,
Well, that's when I say, you know, what are your thoughts on spirituality? What are your thoughts on God? You would say, well, I don't believe in a God. I don't believe in God. And I would say, well, what are your thoughts on spirituality? When I say spiritual, I mean a more intimate, personal, acute awareness of the extraordinary qualities of nature, or communion with the forces and powers that govern our lives. Again, we're speaking of the natural world. So that spirituality to me is thinking more deeply, being more perceptive, living more holistically, thinking in terms of symbiotic relationships rather than competition, but thinking more in terms of cooperation, thinking more altruistically, recognizing yourself in the other, you know, following the golden rule. That's spirituality. You already have all of that. You're a
yeah.
very spiritual person in my
Yeah,
eyes.
yeah. Well, that's interesting you say that, because see, I never looked at it that way. That's just the way I am,
Because
and
you never hung out with any pantheists. You only hung out with religious people and the staunch materialist, reductionist atheists. So you have these two extremes. You hang out in pantheist circles, you'll recognize, like everything I just described, that's true spirituality. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the supernatural world, with heaven or hell, with ghosts or demons or gods or monsters, or supernatural entities or beings. It has nothing to do with all of these classic tropes that we read about and that people generally consider when we think of spirituality. It definitely has to do with ethics and morality, and having a value system that is biocentric. That's true spirituality. Having false concepts of what constitutes purity, having all these idealized, over-exaggerated, elevated notions of what is perfection, that's completely unhealthy. It's unrealistic, and it's actually psychologically and emotionally damaging to the human being, to the human psyche, to think in those terms. And that's where asceticism develops. And that's not being religious. That's a person conforming to their own twisted, distorted version of what purity, of what godliness is, of what it means to be sanctified. And to a pantheist, it's embracing the fact that you're an animal. It's not feeling guilty for the fact that you have biological urges. It's not feeling ashamed, to be on this earth, but to feel that it's a gift, that it's a privilege, that it's that you have an incredible duty, a responsibility to leave the world a better place than what you found it, the way you found it. And these things represent true spirituality and morality and ethics, and what it really means to be a religious person is just to honor an ideal, a higher ethic, to live up to your fullest potential, and seek every day to grow and progress. That's true spirituality, and I would say that's you, brother.
Yeah, and I'm trying to distill it into something short. So, like, the fact that I just recognize that I am an animal, just like all the others, that I'm just part of this same system. Is that really what pantheism is, would you think?
That's one aspect of it. I mean, because what you just described sounds like what any biologist or scientist would say, that we're part of this glorious the tree of life, that we're part of the evolutionary tree. So you're just your mentality is just coinciding with modern science, and that's what's very important also in pantheism, and specifically in biopan, that everything that we say and everything we do and everything we represent is scientifically sound. It's backed up by empirical evidence and data. And I've said it. The only things I speculate on, the only things that are, where I extrapolate, are on our ineffable beginnings and the contemplative future of the evolution of our species, of all life. But everything else falls perfectly in line with science. And science does not contradict this, at all. So what you just said could be said by a scientist and atheist. The distinctions lie in your attitude toward nature, your attitude toward the biological processes, toward the living system, toward the forces of nature, gravity, electromagnetism, strong and weak nuclear force, entropy. How do you feel about these things? Are they just mechanistic, mechanical processes, and there's no design, there's no order in them, there's no teleological purpose behind them? If you can see the trajectory and see how far we've come from that single-celled organism to what we are now, and how it continues to progress and advance into the future, then that is a different perspective than what an atheist or your average scientist would say, because they're much more reductionist and sort of specialized in their understanding of those natural processes. They're not looking at the whole. They're not looking at things holistically. So that's a big part of it.
Yeah, see, and I have a hard time understanding what that means when you talk about the materialistic and the reductionist. I have a hard time even knowing what that means.
Well, the difference is real simple. Trick Slattery, and myself. Those are two personifications of the more mystical, I guess you could say. Even though I'm opposed to mysticism, let's say the more mystical or fanciful, or the more poetic understanding of science and biology and natural processes, and the cold, hard reductionist materialist. He's a materialist. He's an atheist materialist. So look at us, look at our personalities, and you see the contrast there. Where do you? I know you don't view things the way Trick does, because you agree with almost everything I say, and Trick, he doesn't. He thinks that I'm continuously glorifying nature, and I'm holding up aspects of nature that should be condemned. I don't know, that should be considered flawed, or like failures. But I agree that we can improve on primitive nature, as we have, and we can we can incorporate higher ideals and ethics and morality into these natural systems, and improve the quality of life for biological organisms. I agree with him on that, but I don't agree that nature is just purely deaf, blind, and dumb, because he would not be who he is had it not been for the DNA, in him, the DNA that was transmitted, and was built upon and replicated by these natural processes. So what is he talking about? You cannot say there's no intelligence in nature. You can't say this is just a blind process. Evolution is a blind process, but that's part of the process. That's part of the unfolding of experience, of the omnia experiencing things, not knowing what the outcome is. That's part of the purpose for existence itself, is that there is no, it's not written, it's not set, it's not already predetermined. It's this novel emergent process, and that's what's beautiful about it. So,
well, see, here's the interest. Here's a way of looking at it, is that, see, to me, the fact that it wasn't a part of a plan, like here's what I'm saying is, I never ever would there, before the Big Bang, if there was a Big Bang or whatever, we're talking, never was there an intelligence in the universe that would know that there would be Poffo Ortiz and Chandler Klebs, doing hang-ups. Like, never was there a time when something knew that. But nonetheless, through the process, that's what eventually had to happen. That's what happened. It wasn't part of a plan, but the fact that it can happen, whether it's planned or not, makes it kind of interesting. That makes it more impressive in my eyes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The fact
we can get into my own interpretation of the toroidal cyclical nature of the universe, and how it unfolds and transforms from all-knowing self-awareness to to this latent unconscious existence in terms of its cognitive abilities. We can talk about all that, but again, that's just theory. All we know and all we can observe is the unfolding and the manifestation of this particular experience of the universe, of this particular outcome, and how carbon-based life evolved, and how the elements came together and formed this, and how matter and antimatter waged their battle, and matter won out. Like all we can observe and study and recognize is how it unfolded in this particular universe. So, and that's enough for me, because it's extraordinary, and there's just endless things to learn and observe, and test and experience. And that gets to the purpose of life itself. I believe is for experience, to educate and learn, for the universe to learn what it means to be a dog, a cat, a human, a mountain, a sheep, a rainstorm, a tornado, an ocean. Like, that's what the universe is doing. It's experiencing all of those things subjectively.
Yeah, and so it's interesting, because I think like, there's general pantheism, which is unfortunately very vague, but there is a pantheistic attitude towards nature. And then there's biopantheism, where you're trying to codify it and make it sort of like a standard thing of ethics, morality, a philosophy upon which you can actually live, rather than just some vague idea.
I don't know if standardizing it is the right word, because that sounds very close to sort of homogenizing it. That's not the way I would look at it, but definitely giving it a specific direction, giving it a specific focus, and making it practical to everyday life, and making it comprehensive and complete as a belief system, as a religion, as a philosophy, as an ethical worldview.
Yeah.
As a,
Well, here's what I mean. Okay, for example, just as the word vegan has an actual definition, we have the Vegan Society, we have their website, we have the exact definition. You've read it before, you know.
Yeah.
See, that's what anything that's going to be successful at all needs. It needs to be. I mean, that's what I'm referring to as standardizing. That, you know, whether we're codifying, standardizing, or popularizing it, what we're doing is we're defining something. We're defining, this is what it means to be a biopantheist. This is what it means. Just like this is what it means to be a vegan, you know, this is what it means to be an anti-natalist. This is what it means to be whatever, you know. And that I like that. I like that people can come to understand a word and know what it means. That's very important for communication.
Sure. I could read to you like the official definition of biopantheism if you like.
Yeah, sure.
Biopantheism is an ethics-based, biologically focused codification of pantheism with a comprehensive ontology that includes a speculative pandeistic explanation for the origins of the universe and a practical real-world application that involves communion with nature, ecological awareness, sustainable living, environmentalism, wildlife conservation, animal rights, and holistic health. A unique doctrine that places its emphasis on science, cosmology, life in the physical world, and all things relevant and meaningful to the human condition, with a particular emphasis on living organisms and the evolution of consciousness. By combining religious naturalism, deep ecology, and biocentric values, together with classical pantheistic philosophy and a poetic pagan aesthetic in terms of symbolism and metaphor, Biopan represents the quintessential balance between science and religion, as it is both a philosophical worldview and a realistic form of spirituality, a movement that embraces both ancient wisdom and modern scientific knowledge in a meaningful and practical way. Biopan not only teaches science and biology, but also leaves room for the numinous and the mystical transcendent experience, without abandoning critical thinking, logic, or reason. Rejecting the traditional notions of theism and the conventional doctrines, dogmas, and theologies of the Abrahamic faiths, Biopan stands as a healthy, earth-based, nature-centered alternative to the harmful and destructive fundamentalist religions that seek to dominate our world. We are a sanctuary for all those who have been wounded and oppressed by religious indoctrination, valuing objective truth and evidence-based thinking over superstition, emotionalism, and any unsubstantiated false claims of the supernatural. Unreservedly, unreservedly, we seek to bridge the gap between atheism and naturalistic spirituality by cultivating a deep and abiding love and respect for the universe, nature, and all life forms, with a contemporary pantheistic awareness of the eminent and emergent divinity of Bruno, Spinoza, Einstein, Sagan, and Watts. To us, Pan means nature. Pan means forests and trees, mountains and caverns, oceans, rivers, lakes, and streams, plants and animals, earth and sky, body and mind. These things are holy, sacred, and worthy of the highest reverence. The earth is our home, and all things are related, interdependent, and connected. The universe is a living organism, an incomprehensibly massive collective intelligence of which we are all a significant and ever-evolving part. Our goal is to foster and promote these ideals and spread this worldview by encouraging unity, compassion, altruism, and love, to educate, influence, enlighten, and inspire both ourselves and others to live up to our highest potential by recognizing and acknowledging our eminent godhood and tapping into and harnessing our divine creative power as individuals and as a species, now and forever. In nature we trust.
Yeah, I think I've read that before.
I know it was long, so I do apologize for the length, but that is the official definition that's on the description of the Biopantheism Facebook group.
Yeah,
I have a smaller definition on the pantheist.com website. I have a shortened definition of it, but that's the more extended version because I really wanted to, describe the emphasis and the focus and the theme and what we're all about. So.
Yeah, I think I read it on your Facebook page before.
Would you say that you fundamentally agree with that worldview, and can can you comprehend it, and could you embrace it yourself?
Well, I'm still not entirely sure because it was kind of long and I can never remember it all. But but yeah, I mean, it sounds really good, you know, and I mean, I'm hoping that more people head towards that than than these other harmful religions. I'm hoping people are drawn to that instead, because it
As I
seems
said,
so.
as I've always said, it doesn't matter if they call themselves that or not. It doesn't matter, if it's officially labeled as that, as long as they are observing those principles of biocentrism, a life-centered worldview. That's what's important. Putting biological organisms first, sentient life forms that can experience pleasure and pain. This, living in harmony with the earth, living in harmony with nature. I believe this should be our top priority. But the point is, many, many other people feel the same way, but they've never heard of biopantheism. So my goal, my efforts have been to put it out there and show people that something like this does exist, that there is a haven, a safe haven, a sanctuary, as I said in the description, for people who've been burned by the traditional religions, for the atheists and the agnostics and the secular humanists and the pagans who are not hard theists, who don't worship the gods and goddesses of nature, but literally just understand the focus and the emphasis and the symbolism and the aesthetics are a very powerful thing, and that communion with nature is extremely important. The Wiccans and the Druids and all these pathways that within the New Age circles, and now there's a vegan spirituality movement, which is tremendous. It's great. So they're all moving in this direction. I would say that biopan is what they're all moving toward. And I've just created something and given it a label, and made it official, I guess. Yeah, I'm trying to make pantheism official and maintain the most important sort of natural, the most important logical conclusions of pantheistic thought are environmentalism, animal rights activism, veganism. See?
Yeah.
Altruism,
Right.
and treating other living beings with love and respect, which means an end to all speciesism. That means an end to all racism, homophobia, misogyny, sexism. Like, it's that is anathema to this. This is about love and respect for life.
Yeah.
That's why it's called biopantheism.
Yeah, and see, that's just it. Many people are already that way. They just don't have a label for it, and you're just kind of giving them a label that they can use if they want to.
I'm giving them a God. I'm giving them the only God that truly exists. I'm pointing them back to nature. I'm pointing them back to their source, back to reality. That's what I'm doing, away from delusional thinking and just ancient archaic concepts of divinity, and showing them what the true divinity lies within. It lies in the natural world.
Yeah, but you understand what I'm saying, though, right? You understand the importance of having a label that they can use, right?
Yeah, and it sucks because a lot of people don't like labels. That's part of the problem too. That they don't want to associate themselves with. They don't want to be called anything. I'm not religious. I'm just spiritual. I don't like a label. I don't want to. Yeah. I don't want to call it anything, because everybody has their baggage and their hangups. They don't want to. They don't want to use the God word. They don't want to use the religious word. I'm like, fine, use omnia. Use spirituality. Right. They don't want to talk about spirituality. I was like, fine, then call it a philosophy. They don't know anything about philosophy. I'm like, fine, call it a worldview. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but like, here's what I'm saying is, for example, like, I'm glad that the word vegan exists, because that way that's a word that people can Google and they can find out. But
labels are important.
Right.
Terms, titles are important.
Right. And I understand everyone has their reasons why they may not be comfortable with using certain labels. And that's how I tend to feel in a lot of cases. For example, just like I don't call myself Republican or Democrat because I don't really think I'm either, and because I'm so apolitical anyway. But yeah, just as it's important to have the word vegan, I mean, it's important that people have a word, not just any word, but something that's very descriptive. And I think also, not only does it require a proper definition, it also requires it to become popular to a certain extent.
Sure.
And here's what I mean is, something has to become popular enough that people can find information on it. You know, if we talk, you know, a long time ago, well, people couldn't find information on veganism because the word wasn't around, and there wasn't
Right.
such a movement like there is now. You know, and so that's what it's important. It's important both to have a label, but it's also important to give people a representation of that label. So
Right.
when people, if they are trying to learn about biopantheism, and then they think of people like you or me or something like that, well, that's a good thing then. You know, that's what that,
Along those lines, Chandler, I go ahead and I challenge anyone. Go ahead and Google biopantheism.
mhm.
Biopantheism. Like Google it and see what pops up. Do a Google image search and see what pops up. Like it
Yeah.
is out there, man. It's out there now because I've been working my ass off for the last like 3.5
Yeah.
years.
Yeah,
So it's out there.
yeah, yeah. You know what's interesting is I've never actually tried that specifically. You know,
Do it.
I just,
Yeah.
yeah, because usually I just, you know, I just check your Facebook page and I'm talking to you regularly. You know, subscribe to your YouTube channel. But yeah, I've never actually Googled it, so I'm gonna try that and see what shows up.
It exists, man. It's out there. It's in the ether. It's people are discussing it. It's numerous YouTube videos, podcasts, website, Facebook groups. It's all over the place, man. So
Yeah.
yeah, like biopantheism, like bio as in life, pan as in all, the ism. That's all you got. That's all you got to remember the spelling.
Yeah.
Biopantheism. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's
There's
cool.
some kind of a company called Biopan. I think it's like some kind of a machine technology thing. I don't know. It's some kind of an automated thing. It's called Biopan. But that's just the shortened form. You know, as we're speaking, I always say Biopan.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I like that though. Like, because I
there is
think.
no other biopantheism. There was only
Right.
pantheism, pandeism, and panentheism. But biopan, I coined that. That was my creation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a culmination of all scientific knowledge, of all of the most pertinent and meaningful philosophical knowledge. It's just a heightened awareness of of natural systems, of living systems, of this miraculous universe that we live in, that I would say is not supernatural, does not contain supernatural elements, but is absolutely supernal, meaning it's higher. There's an elevated sort of, what's the word, Elysian quality. There's an Elysian quality to the very laws of nature because they bring about life and living systems and natural processes, like inevitably lead to consciousness. And that's why, if we want to get into it, in the cyclical toroidal model, that's why consciousness is where we came from, consciousness is where we're going. Because since that's what the laws of nature always end up doing, everywhere throughout the cosmos, these laws are ubiquitous. So I extrapolate and I theorize that that's what we're doing. We are combining. Every aspect of Omnia is learning to love and accept the other aspects of itself to combine into a collective consciousness, which will then eventually become what is traditionally thought of as the universal God, a universal mind. And then that mind, knowing everything and being everywhere at once, because it is all that exists, will then want to seek novelty and want to explore. And the only way to do that is to lessen itself, to split apart, to forget what it is, and become a physical universe and experience the whole process again. And that's the pandeistic, element aspect to biopan. And then with the torus, if you understand the this energetic pattern of the torus, then you understand that's what the universe is doing, that's what all life is doing, and you can see it in fruits and vegetables, in every living system, in all objects, and every single object is fundamentally a torus. So these things aren't included in pantheism, but they're understood in biopan.
Yeah, I mean, that might be something that'd be interesting to get into just for fun sometime, because that goes beyond biopantheism. That goes into your other stuff that you think about and theorize about.
Well, no, this is a fundamental part of biopan is understanding sort of the structure, energetically, the structure of the universe, and understanding the movement and the cyclical nature of life and living systems. That's all included in biopan. I would say antinatalism is my personal is a personal philosophy which I don't stress in biopan because probably because I receive so much criticism as it is. It's the most unpopular philosophy to have, even though it is the most sensical, it is the most rational. It's actually the most compassionate to have. But so if you were to ask me personally, I could talk about antinatalism, how I don't believe that human beings should be reproducing right now.
Right.
But I don't. That's not included. That's not a requirement or prerequisite at all in biopan. And actually, veganism isn't a prerequisite of biopan either. It's just the natural progression of it. It's the natural reaction to the belief that the universe is divine, that all life is sacred. You can't continue to kill, slaughter, and eat other life forms unnecessarily and say that you love and respect nature. That's what literally made me become vegan.
Yeah.
That's how I became a vegan, was through my philosophy.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting.
It's not a requirement, is all I'm saying, because as long as someone is moving in that direction toward sustainability, toward permaculture, toward a more holistic attitude, as long as someone is moving in that direction toward being more empathetic and compassionate, and sensitive,
right, they'll get there eventually.
They'll get there. Yeah, it's just I don't require it, but it's definitely a part of it now.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, because it all just fits together when you understand when you start seeing others as equals. Then you don't want to torture them and slaughter them, and you don't want to bring them into existence to suffer and cause others to suffer either. So it all fits together.
Maybe, who knows? Maybe antinatalism will become a part of it if I feel more strongly about it because of the problems with overpopulation. I mean, it's just not sustainable to reproduce, to multiply. For human beings to breed right now is literally to choose to have children is the most selfish thing that anyone can do right now. You're not thinking about the earth. You're not thinking about that child. You're literally only doing it for selfish reasons.
Yeah.
And I still need to have a debate with Daniel about that.
Yes, absolutely. Because man, I feel like this is all perfectly compatible with the whole biopantheism. In fact, it's something that must follow if you really understand, I think.
Antinatalism?
Yeah, I think so. I think, the way I look at it is just as you say veganism is the extension of pantheism or biopantheism.
Yeah.
So too then is antinatalism the extension of veganism when you're trying to reduce harm as much as is possible. You know what I mean? Because that's what it's about.
Real simple. We don't live in an ideal world.
Yeah.
So why would you consciously choose to bring an innocent life into this system, into this world that is filled with so much inequality and pain and suffering and so much stratification and disunity? When we live in a world that's more unified and we're living in close accord with nature, and we're living in harmony with living systems and with each other, then you can think about reproducing. But until then, and again, it's just a mentality. It's just a mindset. Obviously, I've said someone somewhere is going to still be making babies.
Right.
So we're not talking about the end of human existence. We're talking about just slowing the fuck down. Like, stop just following your own culture's, brainwashing you, telling you that this is what life's all about, is make babies, make lots of babies. That's all it is. We're saying just slow down, and when you consider climate change, when you consider every living system is now in peril due to overharvesting, to pollution, to the essentially the mismanagement of natural resources, the raping of the earth, capitalism, and structural violence. So, like, it doesn't make any sense. If we're living in a Venus Project resource-based economy style world, then maybe it would make sense. But for now, we need to slow down, and we need to fix the problems that we have already created for ourselves, because all life is suffering because of our
one thing is for sure, I don't think that I'm gonna live to see a world that's that close to ideal. You know what I mean? So I don't like, so what, even if there is a time when that happens, and then maybe we reconsider the question of procreation or not, I won't be around then, so I'm not going to worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, do what you can while you're here. Do what you're able, and try to make a difference, as you have been. Try to make a difference, and teach and promote biopantheism, because it represents love and respect for nature. If you love and respect nature, you're not going to harm it. You're not going to harm other beings. You're not going to pollute. You're not going to destroy the earth. You're not going to damage your own body. You're going to care for and nurture the life principle that's inherent in all things.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Well, I think this is a really good talk.
Would you? So here we are, Chandler. What's the verdict? Do you consider yourself a pantheist in the vein of biopan? Do you consider yourself a pantheist, or are you still just sort of undefined?
Well, I still feel like I'm sort of undefined right now, because I mean, I think I have I probably have the attitude that a pantheist has, which would qualify me as being some kind of a pantheist. But
Absolutely.
I mean, I have nothing against it, really. It's just, I just wonder, I guess I'm just curious about how effective is the label going to be. Only time will tell.
This is what it comes down to. The efficacy of biopan is directly determined by its popularity, by its acceptance to the masses. So if this is something that is embraced by the majority of our culture, then absolutely it will change the world, because we're talking about a vegan culture that's not reproducing and is caring for the environment and believes in permaculture, and everyone is a conservationist, and everyone's an animal lover, and the unified predominant religion, spiritual path, is one that is earth-centered and naturalistic, as opposed to supernatural and defined by its delusions and its adherence to mythology. Instead, we have a modern, scientific, rational, logical form of spirituality that is, and the most basic word is healthy. It's healthier for the earth. It's healthier for human beings. It is life affirming. Life is, the priority. It's biocentric. So think about that for a minute. You want to know how successful it's going to be? Multiply me and clone me and have like 5 billion Poffos. Think about the kind of world you would have. I did not necessarily have to look like me, but with my ideals, with my my philosophy and my sort of the focus and the emphasis, the integrity that I maintain, that we should promote an acute awareness of the beauty and the glory of nature. That would absolutely revolutionize everything. So
So here's a question: is there any vegan that's not a pantheist?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There are vegans that are Christian. There are vegans that are atheists. There are vegans that are Buddhist. There are vegans that are New Age. There are vegans that are Wiccan. There are vegans that hold no religious affiliation whatsoever. Um, that's part of the problem, is that you have all these specialized groups that are all sort of focusing on, you know, a bit and a portion and a piece of the whole. And that's, I'm saying, like, let's bring it all together. Let's bring everyone who fundamentally shares these basic ideals. Let's bring them all together under one banner, because there's strength and unity, the solidarity of the people, of the populace, under one symbol, under one flag. You understand? That creates a momentum and a structure to be reckoned with. It will make the Abrahamic faiths obsolete. It will make all of these archaic, disgusting traditions. It will expose them for what they are. You know, they're harmful and destructive. That's the point. We are for life. We are for anything that is for improving the quality of life. You know, anything that is healthy and salubrious and leads to progress and evolution, not the opposite.
But what I'm getting at,
the opposite. Go ahead.
Here's what I'm getting at, though. Would somebody be vegan unless they already had a respect for life?
Generally, no. Yeah, generally that's what leads to veganism, unless it's strictly for health reasons, you know. And then they don't always stick with it. But generally,
those don't count.
if they're vegan for the animals, I mean, you can go vegan for health reasons, and then you find out the ethical aspect, and you learn the atrocities of factory farming, what goes on, how animals are treated. So then you adopt that aspect as well, and it's more enduring. But generally, it's a love and respect for life. It's seeing. I love this. It's so amazing because it's all it's biopan. It's seeing yourself in the other. It's raising the status of non-human animals to persons. It's viewing them not as objects and commodities and resources and things to be manipulated and exploited, but instead viewing them as what they are. Exactly. They are individuals. They're life forms, and that's the biopan perspective. So, can you be a vegan and not be a biopan? If it's for ethical reasons, you might not know that you're a biopan, but I would say you already are, because your attitude is biocentric. It's not egocentric, it's not anthropocentric, it's biocentric, it's life-centered, and you're putting other life forms above yourself or on par, equal with yourself.
All right, I guess that settles it then. I'm a biopantheist.
Woo!
Yeah. See, because that's what I'm getting at, Poffo. I'm getting at, unless somebody had that respect for life and saw the equal in others, that they are them, you know, unless somebody saw that, I don't think they would go vegan. And those health vegans, I don't count them. I really don't. And here's why. Because if they're all, for example, if they only live on a plant-based diet just because they heard it's healthier, that means nothing, because they could still go kill animals for sport. You know, it's like,
I mean, generally, it's a himsa. It's doing no harm. You know, it's doing no harm to other life forms, to other animals. So, it's not a diet. It's just the diet is an extension of the philosophy itself. So just like veganism is an extension of the philosophy of biopan. But it's an interesting thing, man. I mean, we want to unite these groups, but I've just recently I was sharing my is biopan the new meta religion of veganism, or that interview that I did, and I was trying to get a friend of mine to share them in her group. She's a member of like 50 some vegan groups, and she wouldn't do it. She wouldn't share it because she said it's too you know, we're bleeding into spiritual and religious religious concepts, and people have very strong views on that. They don't want to mix veganism and religion and spirituality. And I'm saying, but what if this spirituality is something that actually leads to veganism? What if this spirituality is naturalistic? I'm not sure if she understood, but I'm saying, what if the spirituality is completely earth-based, meaning no heaven, no hell, no afterlife, no angels and demons, we're literally talking about with nature. And she wouldn't share it, and she said, you know, it's not. She goes, I'm administrator of some of these groups, and I just can't break that rule. So this is the problem that we're running up against. This is the difficulty is how do you convince people that there is a form of spirituality that has nothing to do with the supernatural, that has nothing to do with you know, traditional, conventional religious concepts. It's just about education, you know. I've always said Richard Dawkins would be a pantheist if he really understood what pantheism was, and so would every other scientist, biologist, any person who has an affinity for the wilderness and the natural world, and you know, loves animals and is working hard to protect the environment and is living, you know, a healthy holistic life. I would say that they're all pantheistic already. So how do we I don't know, man. How do we educate the masses? All we can do is keep talking about it and writing about it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. And hopefully people will eventually overcome that fear they have of it. Because right now, I mean, we're okay, the time we're living in, Poffo, we live in a time where people are massively exiting these old religions, the mainstream Abrahamic religions. People are leaving those religions, and they're turning to all sorts of other weird stuff.
It's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So some people, yeah, they've just become, you know, the stereotypical atheist, kind of like Trick would be, like, you know, like you described him. Others turn to some kind of Eastern philosophy or some kind of form of paganism or whatever, and then some people become some form of pantheist. But what's interesting is that there are all these emotions about the religion they came out of, and anything that sounds a little bit too much like it,
sure,
is, you know, is something to stay away from. And that's how I feel too. I feel the same way, you know.
You have an aversion. You have an aversion to religious language or anything, any form of association with the negative, oppressive belief systems that you came out of, that you escaped from. Which is why it's so important to understand that biopantheism is anti-theist. We are completely anti-theist. I am against Christianity. I am against Judaism. I am against Islam. I am against traditional beliefs and doctrines of heaven and hell and spirit worlds and you know, all these things. There is an aspect of the exploration of the paranormal. I'm fascinated by the paranormal phenomenon, and I think that science, we should do everything in our power to you know, investigate all of these you know, all of these things, these cases of seemingly supernatural experiences. I'm all about, you know, researching that and getting to the bottom of what all that is. I'm totally open to it, but I don't ever teach or promote the idea that there are ghosts or you know, the like that the soul is immortal or anything like that, or belief in reincarnation, because these came from, you know, ancient religious systems, and there were actual political and you know, socio-political motivations behind where these concepts came from. But I forgot, I lost my train of thought. But what was the last thing you said?
Oh yeah, I was just talking about how people have an aversion to this language that sounds too much like what they came from.
And that's why we've incorporated the word omnia. That's why we use different terminology. That's why, like, you know, we've taken back the word spiritual. We're taking back the concept of what religion means and stuff. We don't have to use those words, but if we do, it's not offensive because we know what we mean. And in pantheistic circles, we know what we mean, you know, and we don't have to use those words at all.
Right. Yeah, you're able to drop the words when you need to. But and see, here's the thing about it, though, and this is very important for people to understand, is that even though I have kind of an aversion to some language, and even words like pantheism or biopantheism, because it has the whole theism in it, even that sounds a little scary. But here's the deal. The reason I put up with this stuff is because your vegan activism is part of this. You know, it's all part of the same thing, and for that reason, I listen to you, Poffo. Whereas
I like this. So the truth just came out. The only reason you've ever let me on your show and listen was because I was a vegan.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Basically, when you put it that way.
So nothing I've ever said has really had any relevance or weight. It's just that I'm an animal rights activist. So I'm okay in your book.
Well, yeah. Basically, you're okay in my book. So regardless of even if I did disagree with everything else you were saying, I don't really think it would matter all that much. But see, what it comes down to is that's the reason I listen to you, whereas say I don't listen to George. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it's okay to kill animals as long as we treat them nicely before we kill them.
I don't want to talk bad about the guy. His his standards of morality and his value system and his philosophy is very sort of loose and dynamic and changing all the time. Whereas I'm open to change and growth, but I'm very conservative in my beliefs, and you know, and pretty solid and grounded in what I know to be reality.
But the real point of this, Poffo, is that I'm not going to listen to somebody or take anyone seriously when there's something clearly immoral about them. That's how I am.
Well, and remember, we got who I listen to. And I know what you're implying, but remember, people don't realize that eating meat is immoral. People don't realize that consuming dairy is immoral. People don't realize that using animal products is immoral because they don't see the process. They don't see the source. They don't see where it's coming from. They don't see what it took, what that pig, cow, chicken, turkey, sheep, what it went through to get, you know, onto their plate. I like to speak to the idea of go back to the subject of aversion again and stuff. It's very important. I don't want people to think that this is a cult or it's just another religion and you know, the goal is again authoritarian control, some form of mind control or you know, psychological emotional oppression or manipulation. It represents the exact opposite. It's about liberation. It's about self-sufficiency. It's about going within. It's about using your own powers of observation and reasoning skills, and it's about promoting critical thinking, which is the antithesis of most religions, which squash inquiry and questioning and, you know, and critical thought. They literally oppose that, and faith is touted as a virtue. I say there is no faith required whatsoever in biopan. You know, just your eyes and your ears and your mind, and you know, having a human being. I was about to say having a soul, but just to clarify, when I say soul, I mean the part of you that makes you you. You know, your mind, your will, your emotions, not necessarily some ephemeral presence that's going to live beyond your body, but I mean, you know, the most essential part of who you are, a combination of all your memories, of your cognitive abilities, of your thoughts right now, of your environment, who you are, your identity. That's what I mean by soul. So all you need is to be you know, a healthy, generally somewhat you know, well-adjusted, emotionally balanced person to embrace this and accept this. It doesn't require faith. It doesn't require, you don't have to pay a fee to join the club. Literally, you know, you embrace the symbol, you embrace the name, and you, most importantly, you embrace the ideals, the philosophy, the awareness is already there. The people who are pantheists have been pantheists their whole life. They just never knew there was a word for it. So the same thing with biopan. Like the last 10 people that just joined my group have said the exact same thing to me. This is amazing. I never knew something like this existed. You've perfectly eloquently put into words what I've always felt, and I can't believe there's actually you know, a community for this. Like, I'm so thankful. They were already biopanics, you know, and they were already moving in this direction, and so I'm trying to create a beacon for them to you know, to help galvanize these ethics and ideals and create an impact on the world to make a
Yeah,
difference.
you have no idea how much I've heard that about other things. Like I've heard people say that about veganism. They didn't know there was a word for that, or they didn't know there was a word for atheist. They didn't know that there was such a thing as an asexual. You know, they didn't know any of these things, but they were that way. They believe that way already, but then they find a word that fits them.
Sure.
And that's cool.
In that sense, terms are helpful. Terminology is a good thing. Using language and labels are not necessarily detrimental to anybody. You don't need to be afraid to associate yourself with something.
Right. Well, and here's the deal: is some labels are more effective than others. And Poffo, here's the deal: one final note about Christianity is that it doesn't mean anything. Not really. And it doesn't mean anything.
That label has been so what's the word? Misused, embraced, and literally every person in prison is a born again Christian.
Yeah.
Because all the popes were Christian. They were horrible human beings. People have done absolutely atrocious things in the name of Christ. It doesn't really mean anything. It's literally it's the most universal religion that's like the easiest to adopt, really.
So here's the deal: everybody calls them a Christian. However, that doesn't tell you what they believe, because they all disagree. They have little all the different denominations, even among Protestantism, have all the disagreements. So the label is no longer descriptive and is therefore entirely useless. Right. And yet the ironic thing is that it always brings up something negative in my mind. It always does. It always brings up something very negative, because I don't know what kind of Christian they are, but just hearing that word makes me cringe. Like, oh no.
So let's see. I know you like keeping things simple, so let me try if I can make this like a summation and keep it succinct. If you are a biopan, right off the bat, the first thing my heart tells me, you love animals. You love animals, you love wilderness, you love nature, you love the outdoors. You don't have to be a vegan, but you should at least be vegetarian or moving in that direction, recognizing, that what we're doing right now is unsustainable. So you should at least be acquiring knowledge and moving in that direction. There should be, I would say, an affinity for the sciences, for deep intellectual pursuits, for acquiring knowledge, and being creative, artists and poets and thinkers and dreamers. This is who I am calling right now. Those out there who may consider themselves misfits or have never been accepted and don't feel like they have a home, don't feel like they have a place where they belong. There is a community here. There is a safe haven for all those people who would rather, just be at home outdoors and playing with animals, who would rather be around animals than around people generally. So wildlife, outdoors, people, outdoor enthusiasts, and then deep thinkers and philosophers, and specifically those who understand and study science and astronomy and cosmology and anthropology, and understand psychology and human nature, and specifically those who are interested in biology and evolution. I would say evolution is a prerequisite. You need to believe and understand that the theory of evolution is not just a theory, it's scientific fact, that we are all evolving, that all life has evolved, that we are descended from early hominids, descended from primates. We are primates. So that's kind of a standard right there. Like you have to believe in evolution. You don't necessarily have to reject the idea of an afterlife, but your focus and emphasis should not be on anything supernatural, because this is a completely naturalistic philosophy. So basically, the naturalists, spiritual naturalists and religious naturalists, those who atheists, agnostics, who seek ritual and communion and fellowship with others, and some form of spirituality that is naturalistic. That's just very important. there's a aspect, an element here of health, of wellness, of well-being, of holistic health, of taking care of the body, living green and recycling and doing things to minimize your environmental footprint. Just a deep interest in ecological studies and ecology. So I mean, maybe this is too narrow a description. Not many people fall under this, but it is what it is, man. I mean, this is who I am. This is what I represent. I believe this is what's going to make the world a better place. So I'm expressing it now. Like, you have to understand ecology. You have to understand that everything is connected to everything else. That nature knows best. That everything you do, it goes somewhere. That we don't live in an isolated system. So things like that, man. Just believing in science. Promoting science, understanding biology, embracing evolution, embracing our essential animality, that we're animals and there's nothing wrong with that. That's nothing
I'm
to
down
be
with
ashamed
that.
of. Yeah, nothing to be ashamed of, and love and respect for other animals, and absolute equality for all. Man, that's veganism is a social justice movement because we recognize animals as persons. We see them as individuals, not as objects and things, and not below us. We don't view ourselves as superior. We are not superior life forms to the other biological organisms on this earth. We are superior intellectually, but we also see the damage it's caused, right?
Yeah.
But
only some of us are, anyway.
Yeah, it's some of us. So all these things, not viewing other life forms as inferior, like literally viewing all life, truly viewing life as sacred and special, and recognizing the individuality that's there, and the just the unique quality of individual organisms to be so beautiful and intricate and subtle and complex, and embracing the all, man, embracing the life cycles, embracing your own death is a part of it as well. Recognizing that all things get recycled, that we are our time here is very temporal, temporary. It's very impermanent, is what I'm saying. Is the human existence, we're like a blink, in and out, 70, 80 years. So you recognize that, and yet you understand that the system is larger and greater and bigger than you, and it goes on, and you're a part of something greater. So all of these things, man, and all of these things are found in many of the world's religions, many philosophical belief systems that are existent in the world today, but they're all found, and they are highlighted and exemplified in biopan.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good, man. We probably do need to bring this to a close. I think we've been going on a long time, as usual. But yeah, I think this may clarify some things. I hope this was interesting to anyone who listens as well.
I hope it helped you clarify some things. I hope you have more, I hope you have a greater understanding of who you are and who I am. And
I am an animal.
We're all animals, brother.
Yeah,
we are animals in a world full of animals, and there's nothing wrong with that, man. That's perfectly acceptable, and it's not. You're not considered a dirty, fallen creature. You're just a creature that's in the process of becoming something greater. We're always becoming. All of nature is always evolving and progressing and advancing. So it's important, man. We're in transition, and there's nothing wrong with that. So embrace it. Life is change. Death is change, and change is nature's delight.
Okay, so are we done? Should I end the broadcast now, or because I don't? If you have any more profound statements,
no, man, I appreciate your time, and I as always, man, it's a pleasure, and thank you. And this will conclude our broadcast of Sacred Places. So thanks for listening, everyone. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the in the comment section below. And visit the website, visit our Facebook pages. I also have a Pantheist vegan support group. Just look it up. Just Google biopantheism. So thanks for listening, everyone. And thank you, Chandler Klebs.
Yeah, thank you, Poffo, for another fun talk. I'm going to
All
click
right,
the
brother.
button now. Bye, everybody.